Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you so much for joining us once again. You can follow us on X. My personal account is at am Salazar, and my we do have an X account for this program at Mexico Daily. Making the headlines in Mexico, and I have to say around the world, has to do with this what has been known or it's being published as an extermination camp that was found in the municipality of Teuchtitlan, which is in the state of Jalisco. And there has been a huge debate in terms of really, should we call it an extermination camp, or is it a forced recruitment site for organized crime? And unfortunately, a lot of the debate this week that took place was around what do you call this? But the bottom line is just it was a site where clearly, at least there seems to be evidence that people were killed, people were murdered, people were tortured. And regardless of whether you want to call it an extermination camp or not, it is very representative of the tragedy of the disappeared in Mexico because this site was, although it had been frozen, had been supposedly taken over by the National Guard and state authorities. It wasn't until the mothers and parents of the disappeared were able to go into this Rancho Isaguirre, and basically start taking pictures and start to search for their loved ones who have disappeared. To talk about the political impact of this ranch or of this news and how it's being reflected around the world. And what does this mean for the Mexican government's ability to stop the disappearances of people in Mexico? Joining us today is, you know him well, he's Francisco Rivas. He's been joining us throughout the years. He is the head of the National Citizens Observatory, the general director. Once again, Francisco, gosh, I really appreciate you joining us today, but such a sad occasion, because we are talking again about a site where massacres are taking place, and I'm not too sure that we're seeing from the Mexican government a strategy to really clamp down on these criminal organizations that are killing, are massacring, and are forcibly recruiting young people to work for them. Welcome to the show. What's your reaction to this news?
Thank you, Ana Maria. I agree with you. It's very sad because uh, this is another evidence that in Mexico, life doesn't matter. There is no really a response from the state to understand what's going on through the territory, how they can solve the problem of the penetration of organized crime in the natural life of society. Because in Mexico, of course, we can find some massacres, we can find camp of extermination, sorry, because there is a lack of control of territory from our authorities,
Mhm.
and that control is detained by organized crime. In those territories, they can do crimes, they can prosper, they can grow, they can control legal business, they control the life of people, they put church, they can give to communities, schools, uh, hospitals, so they can do whatever they want because the state really don't care for do their job. Right now, we can see in this particular administration, the Claudia Sheinbaum administration, more results in 2 months that we can see in the last 6 years with President Obrador, Lopez Obrador, but still is just a response from uh, the war of taxes that United States want to impose, as they ask for some results against organized crime. This government are doing something, but it's not enough because the problem is very complex, and they right now are just focused on try to avoid these taxes from United States. But this particular case shows that in Mexico you can have a property that actually this property was uh, something that they took from a private, the organized crime, the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, took from a private, and the private made a complaint. He asked for support for authorities, but authorities doesn't did anything. Then they can operate for at least 10 years this camp, and nothing happened. In
Mhm.
October, this camp was took for the National Guard, and then give the security to the
Mhm.
prosecutor office of Jalisco, and nothing happened. They
Nothing
don't
happened.
even look for what's going on there. And
Mhm.
it's until mothers and people that are looking for their own relatives, their own
Mhm.
people, is when we know that in this place they can be
Mhm.
forced to recruit young people. They
Mhm.
was trained, they was killed, and
Mhm.
still the authorities says no, it's not such a big deal.
Mhm.
There is just few rest. There are few bodies, but
Mhm.
it's nothing to scare. And they found at least 200 pairs of shoes. We
Yeah.
don't know how many people was there. We
Mhm.
for sure know that there is some evidence of this recruit, this training, and this killing.
Mhm.
And still, the federal government is trying to avoid the conversation, and there are not really invest in create some capability for the federal justice or for local justice
Mhm.
to find these people and to try to give them an identity, because those bodies,
Mhm.
there are people,
Right.
and there are
Yeah.
people that are looking for them.
Yeah. You know what? It continues to surprise me how much this government, against all traditional political strategies, not only in Mexico but around the world, uh, which is to recognize the victims and treat victims well, even though you may not have the best strategy to solve the problem. But in general, around the world, politicians treat they try to treat the victims with certain respect, at least those politicians that govern in democracies. In Mexico, I just, going back to Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, the mistreatment of these families that have are victims of organized crime or just victims of the lack of rule of law in Mexico, because their some family members disappeared. I mean, what's the number that you're handling right now in terms of the disappeared? But my impression is that the problem is increasing under the new administration, and it's not getting better. And I'm just wondering what is the end game here? At what point, one, they're going to start working with the families, or at least recognize that they're victims, and two, what should be the strategy to try to reduce the number of disappearances in Mexico?
Well, the problem is the amount of people that is registered that disappear right now
Mhm.
is 125,000
It's
people. That it's a huge number, but it's still not a
mhm,
real number, because
mhm,
you remember at the end of the Lopez Obrador administration, they changed the methodology for registration,
mhm,
and they just erased at least 30,000 people that
mhm,
that is still disappear,
mhm,
because families complain about that their relatives never was found, but they
mhm.
just erase the names, they erase the stories about
Yeah,
those people that is disappear.
right.
And You are completely right. The government in Mexico, usually the government is not focused on victims, even when you are a victim of crime. And
Mhm,
I can give my personal history. Long time ago, my father was kidnapped, my sister was kidnapped. I had a lot of problems with security here in Mexico. And every single
mhm,
time, as victim, they mistreat you. They treat you as you are guilty of being kidnapped. So
mhm,
the policemen, prosecutors start to accuse you to do something bad, and for
mhm,
this reason, you are a victim of crime, and not
mhm,
because they are not doing their job. The other thing is, even if in past we have not a good treatment, but
mhm,
was much better than right now. Right now,
mhm,
and you can remember, uh, President Lopez Obrador, he met a few times the mother of El Chapo Guzman, but he
mhm,
never sit and hear what the victims of our countries have to say. And
mhm,
at least Calderon at that time, he many times received the victims. He many times received also the accusation and the complaints in the face, in his own face about the
mhm,
victims. And
mhm,
still he hear and try to
mhm,
solve something. Even Peña
mhm,
did something, but Lopez Obrador nothing. And right now we are seeing the general prosecutor of
mhm,
Mexico saying that is not true what
mhm,
the families are saying about the the bodies that was found there,
mhm,
and they are trying to change the narrative, n- eh, and not to hear what the families has to say or what they
mhm,
found. They did the job that the local authorities and federal authorities
mhm,
has to do it, but still they are not hearing the victim. So for me, it's right now it's worse than ever about how they uh, forgot the victims.
mhm. Joining us today is Francisco Rivas. You know him well if you've been following the show throughout the years. He presides the Citizens Observatory here in Mexico, and today we're analyzing this tragedy of what's known as El Rancho Izaguirre, a site where at least there seems to be really concrete information that it was, and testimony that it was a site where there was forced recruitment by organized crime. And there is a lot of evidence, including body parts or bones, basically, that in this ranch and this site, people were murdered and they were quote unquote disappeared. And that's why the mothers of the disappeared, these different organizations are trying to get in and are trying to see or try to even identify clothes. There was 200 pairs of shoes that were found, and clothes and backpacks. And that is Francisco, the way this has been handling is shocking. The Attorney General, Mexico's Attorney General, Fiscal General de la República, Alejandro Gersmanero, basically just from one moment to the other said at the press conference, tomorrow, let's all meet up at the ranch and you guys are going to be able to go in and see this ranch, which is, it is somewhat surprising because it is a crime scene, but more importantly, when the families found out that they were going to be able to go in to the area, they tried to get there and they were mistreated again. And apparently, in trying to recuperate or start to process the crime scene, a lot of these things were taken away, and there's these just horrifying and heartbreaking scenes of family members of people of people who've been reported disappeared, crying and trying to get into the site to see if they could even find some personal items. I am still shocked in terms of how it's being handled.
Yeah, because the problem is they are more concerned to uh, control the narrative than solve the crime. If you want to solve the crime, you have to look for every single detail. You need
Mhm,
specialists, archaeologists,
Mhm.
dentists that are looking for the bones. They are analyze the data, and they can do exactly what they has to do in terms of how you conserve the space and you don't contaminate the space. Uh, in this moment, if they are looking for, they are making some moments for bring the journalists and bring people to see
Mhm.
the ranch and not try to protect the area, it's because they
Yeah.
don't care for justice. If you want to do a
Mhm.
very good job, you need to have evidence. You
Mhm.
need to control and conserve the evidence. If you do tours in the ranch, it means that you don't care. So
Mhm.
it's really bad. And at the same time, when people are showing the pictures that what they found in
Mhm.
this ranch, and the prosecutor office says, "Oh no, it's nothing. It's not true." It's very.
Very
I don't.
disconcerting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's because it's something that looks like is more important to have good publicity, then control the territory, then
Mhm.
fight the crime. Because still, if you don't do a good investigation, you are increasing the impunity. And
Yeah.
impunity is the fuel that may grow the crimes.
Yeah, I wrote a piece this week, that was published in El Financiero, one of my op-eds. And I worry. I mean, the story in itself is tragic, and El País, the newspaper El País, or the
Yeah.
website, news website, really did a good job in terms of just taking pictures. You know what I mean? They actually took all these pictures of, there was socks, there was shoes, there was backpacks, and just kind of highlighting each one of these as an example of what people are finding and how precious those clothes items would be for any family member who could identify these items as belonging to their loved one that has been reported as disappeared. But it also highlights the way this is being handled, like you said, in terms of not respecting perhaps the chain of evidence. And how are they going to use all this evidence in terms, if they eventually were able to detain somebody, and try to prosecute them for what happened in that ranch. But if you also add, and this is kind of my comment in terms of what I published this week, I think violence is going to increase in Mexico.
Of course,
Um,
it's
and,
increasing.
and and it's going to increase because of pressures from the U.S. government to go after these criminal organizations, and the fact that seems to be a change in strategy, which means that if violence is going to increase, that we are probably going to face a rash of even more disappearances in Mexico. And I just don't see, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I would like to hear your opinion about this. I don't see any strategy to try to reduce the disappearances in Mexico, despite the fact that President Sheinbaum did present this week a kind of a list of actions that her government's going to take, including to be more transparent in terms of the numbers. But I just don't see any strategy or any coordination between the Fiscalia, local authorities, and the federal government to reduce the tendency of murders, but also of the number of people that are disappearing. Am I wrong?
No, you're completely right. I'm sorry for our hearing your auditor, but for me, it's a
Audience, yeah.
joke. Yeah, audience. For me, it's a
Yeah.
joke what we are seeing, because all the proposal that President Sheinbaum is doing is something
Mhm.
that already exists. The thing
Mhm.
is, they cut budget, and they
Mhm.
cut extremely this budget. And of course, if you want to
Extra money.
have, yeah, the budget for security and justice, if you want to have a good job made by the prosecutor, you need to train them. you need to give them everything that they need to do their job, and you have to support them. Of course, you have to pay well and
Mhm.
treat well. That is, in Mexico, is almost impossible if you are a policeman or if you work in
Mhm.
a prosecutor office. The treatment that you receive from the state and from citizens is awful. But at the same time, you need to put money and show that it really cares. And what this government did, and the government of Lopez Obrador in the last 7 years, so
Mhm.
these two administration, every police of the country, every prosecutor of the country lost at least 40% of their budget.
Yeah.
Eh, So we have less policemen, less prosecutors, less
Mhm.
investigators. How you can solve something? At the same time, and you are completely right, the violence is increasing and will grow again because we have a few problems. When you put all your uh, eggs in one basket, and this one
Mhm.
basket is avoid the taxes from United States, so you have to fight specifically something about organized crime that is especially the narco traffic
Mhm.
related with fentanyl,
Mhm.
and you are using the force of the state to avoid um, the traffic of person to Mexico for United States.
Mhm.
You are losing capability, but at the same time, if the drugs don't go to United States, and believe me, I don't want the drugs to go to United States, but if you
Mhm.
are just focused in avoid that the drugs don't go to United States, that drugs remains in Mexico. And of course, one
Mhm.
part of them will go to Europe. The other part will stay in Mexico. And even
Mexico.
if right now we are not a consuming country, we don't have the problems of consuming that United States or Europe has, but will grow the consume of fentanyl and other drugs that stay here in Mexico. We will
Mhm.
have a lot of migrants from Central and South America, from Asia, from Africa, and these government are
Mhm.
not will good very good prepared or try to give them a job or support them. And those people, a lot of them will find a job and do what is correct, but other will be recruited by organized or normal
Mhm.
crime. So
Yeah.
for this reason, we will have more problems with organized crime,
Mhm.
and we have more problems with common crime. And
Mhm.
I, I just want to add something. When you see the history and you look for case of success in the war for reduced crime, for
Mhm.
example, the Palermo's case,
Mhm.
of course, there was a fight against a group of organized crime. But at the same time, you have a very huge process of justice that it was solid, that they respect
Mhm.
law, and they was doing very professional. So if you go against a group, you go against with police, but at the same time you made all the part for give the for justice and resolve the problem as a
Mhm.
state. If you go just for try to solve a part of a problem of
Mhm.
organized crime and you don't solve the other parts, and you still
Yeah.
remain with the impunity, what happens is you cut one head of organized crime, but two or three more will grow. So,
Yeah.
for this
Yeah.
reason, what they are trying to do is not only not enough, is something that is actually very dangerous for our country.
Well, well, it is one of the many cases that we're going to be following very closely here on Living in Mexico because it's kind of a reminder how violent Mexico is. And I'm in many ways glad it's been reported, it's being reported abroad. And I think there's going to be a lot of interest in trying to figure out and try to understand what happened And above all, what is going to be the strategy of this government to try to confront this type of violence and the disappearances that are taking place? Francisco Rivas, he heads the National Citizens Observatory. Once again, I really appreciate you joining us here on Living in Mexico. Please come back soon.
Thank you very much, Ana
Thank you
Maria.
very much. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening to Living in Mexico. Please don't go away. I'll be right back.